Leung Chun-ying says no prior knowledge of John Tsang's refusal to answer questions from 4 lawmakers. Heads of South Korean conglomerates face questions in political scandal. And no apology during Shinzo Abe's visit to Pearl Harbor later this month.
Hello and a very good evening. Senior government officials appeared to be out of sync regarding Financial Secretary John Tsang's refusal yesterday to answer questions from 4 lawmakers. The government is seeking judicial review of their LegCo oaths. Well, today the chief executive said he had no prior knowledge of Tsang's decision to block the lawmakers' questions. Almin Leung reports.
Before the court said yes to judicial reviews of 4 more lawmakers' LegCo oaths, it was a definite no from John Tsang yesterday morning. He raised eyebrows for refusing to take questions from Lau Siu Lai, Edward Yu, Nathan Law and Leung Kwok Hong at a LegCo panel meeting. The financial secretary explained he acted on legal advice from the Department of Justice. He had noted in the past that you always agree with your boss. So, whose call was it? I did not know beforehand, otherwise we would have discussed this internally, said Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying. I don't think one needs to go to that length to refuse questions from the 4 lawmakers. But Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying refused to say who should take responsibility for this. Those ignored by John Tsang yesterday questioned the administration's argument and accountability.
It's like a very a B movie of Hollywood. You don't want to see it. You want to watch it. They should come out and give us a very, very good explanation why there is so many misunderstanding, trapping, whatever you call it.
Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam attempted to put the issue to rest yesterday. In a letter to the LegCo president, she mentioned public officers will only reply to questions or comments from LegCo members who took valid oaths. But to avoid unnecessary arguments and maintain smooth operation in the legislature, all members will be responded to. Almin Leung, TVB News.
Overseas now, it's been a rare moment of public reckoning for some of South Korea's most powerful business leaders. A parliamentary panel is questioning them over accusations their companies were pressured by President Park Geun-hye or her friend to give money to 2 non-profit foundations. James Aitken reports.
As a massive political scandal continues to unfold, South Korea's biggest tycoons have had to leave their corporate towers and run a gauntlet of media and protesters. The heads of companies like Samsung and Hyundai have been grilled in an unprecedented parliamentary hearing over a political scandal that could bring down the country's president. And all of it is being broadcast live on TV. Lawmakers are looking into prosecution claims that Park and her shadowy friend Choi Soon-sil pressured corporations to give money to non-profit foundations for preferential treatment. Lee Jae-yong, the vice chairman at Samsung Electronics, faced heated questioning on a wide range of issues. After telling the panel he was appearing with a heavy heart, Lee said he would work to ensure Samsung avoids becoming involved in any shameful scandal in the future. In testimony, Lee said Park had asked him for support for cultural and sports projects, but did not specifically request money. He said Samsung did not give financial support in order to get something in return. Samsung donated more than $17 million to 2 foundations, the most of any group. But Lee avoided answering questions about his company's sponsorship of the Choi family outside of the foundations, indicating only that it was inappropriate. Other corporate bosses relayed similar testimony, but one added that it is difficult for business leaders to refuse government. None of the executives facing questioning has been accused of any wrongdoing in the case. The scandal has stoked public anger over deep ties between politicians and the country's top family-controlled businesses. Last week, the opposition rejected Park's request for Parliament to find a way and a time for her to step down. She faces an impeachment vote on Friday. Today, a top official in her party said Park was willing to accept her party's proposal to step down in April. James Aiken, TVB News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe won't apologize for Japan's attack when he visits the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor late this month. A government spokesman says the historic visit is to pay the Prime Minister's respects to those who died there in December of 1941. The Japanese leader will join U.S. President Barack Obama at the site, which saw the Japanese Navy stage a surprise attack, a move which ushered America into World War II. Abe announced late yesterday he would have a summit meeting with Obama in Hawaii and visit Pearl Harbor. He will be the first Japanese leader to go to the site. The unexpected announcement came 2 days before the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. It also came 6 months after Obama became the first sitting American president to visit Hiroshima. The city came under U.S. atomic bombing in the closing days of the war. Well, whether by accident or design, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump appears to be signaling a tougher American policy towards China. And that sparked warnings from both the outgoing Obama administration and Beijing.
The stream of visitors at Trump Tower seems never ending these days, as U.S. President-elect Donald Trump decides who will be in his new administration. Among the visitors was former Vice President and environmentalist Al Gore, who had a discussion with Trump about climate change, an issue the tycoon had dismissed as a hoax not too long ago. Whether this signals a shift on his thinking about global warming is hard to say, given Trump's taste for unpredictability. That unpredictability also seems to crop up in his foreign policy ventures, the most recent example being his phone conversation last week with Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen, something which broke decades of diplomatic protocol. Beijing has voiced its displeasure at the phone call and has summoned the U.S. ambassador for an explanation, although it reserved its most stinging criticism for Taiwan. Today, the Foreign Ministry said it hopes the United States will not allow Tsai to transit through the U.S. when she visits Guatemala next month. Beijing warned Washington against sending the wrong signals to Taiwan independence forces. The White House said progress in Sino-U.S. relations and cooperation on issues like climate change could be undermined by a flare-up over Taiwan.
It's unclear exactly what the strategic effort is, what the aim of the strategic effort is, and it's unclear exactly what potential benefit could be experienced by the United States, China, or Taiwan. But I'll leave that to them to explain.
U.S. diplomats were shocked by Trump's phone conversation with the Taiwanese leader, and several officials privately expressed deep unease that Trump's team did not inform the Obama administration in advance or give it a chance to provide input.
Still in the U.S., Green Party presidential nominee Jill Stein is suing one state to ensure presidential ballots are recounted in 3 states. This as President-elect Donald Trump accused Stein of carrying out a money-making scam. Stein is suing Pennsylvania election officials in federal court to demand a recount. Michigan began its recount after a federal judge there ordered one without delay. In Wisconsin, a recount is now into its 2nd week. Knowing a recount costs more than $9 million, Trump accused Stein of scamming people out of money. But across the street from Trump Tower in Manhattan, Stein defended her actions.
Russia and China used their veto power in the UN Security Council to block a draft resolution that would have approved a 7-day truce aimed at getting humanitarian aid to Syria's besieged city of Aleppo. Sonia Artero has that story.
Stressing that Aleppo is becoming one giant graveyard did nothing to convince Russia and China to back a week-long truce. The resolution had 11 votes in favor, but because Russia and China are permanent council members and have veto power, it failed to pass. The U.S. and British ambassadors to the UN warned that China's insistence to back the Russian Syria's president will result in a death sentence for civilians in Aleppo.
They have vetoed the delivery of basic medicine to people who will die without it. They have vetoed the evacuation of sick and dying people who have no chance of surviving in the bombed-out hospitals and clinics of eastern Aleppo. They have vetoed the delivery of food to civilians who could starve to death.
China has chosen to side with Russia, a party to this conflict. They have chosen to veto not because of a lack of consultation, but because of their long-standing, misplaced faith in a despot who has killed nearly 500,000 of his own people.
停止这种毒化安理会工作气氛。
China hit back, accusing critics of poisoning the Security Council atmosphere. Russia's UN ambassador insists this truce undermines the one Moscow is currently negotiating with Washington. But America's UN ambassador insinuated that's a lie.
That is a made-up alibi. We have not reached a breakthrough because Russia has been more focused on preserving its military gains than helping Aleppo's civilians.
Meantime, rebel shelling in Aleppo yesterday left 2 Russian nurses in a field hospital and 8 civilians dead. The Russian Defense Ministry put the blame on the U.S., Britain, and France because they support the rebels. In Idlib, rescue workers scrambled to pull wounded children from the rubble of buildings hit by airstrikes. Sonia Artero, TVB News.
Still ahead in the news. The French Prime Minister resigns and declares himself a candidate for the presidency. A drop in ranking for local students in an international assessment test. And local bodybuilders gearing up for a prestigious competition.
And a warm welcome back to TVB News. French Prime Minister Manuel Valls has stepped down to focus on running for president at next year's election. Valls announced his candidacy yesterday after President Francois Hollande decided not to run for. Valls hopes to unite socialists and give the left a chance to stay in power. But opinion polls suggest the second round of the election could pit Marine Le Pen, the leader of the far-right Front National, against conservative François Fillon. Valls' replacement is Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve. The 53-year-old is a close ally of Hollande. He has become a popular figure in French politics as the champion of the fight against Islamic extremism.
More local news. The Ken Sung assault hearing continued today, with the defence making its closing submissions at the district court. As Rachel Leung reports, the defence questioned whether footage of the incident at the height of the Occupy movement actually showed the policemen who were accused of the assault.
The 7 policemen were greeted by supporters as they returned to the courthouse this morning. They all have pleaded not guilty to one joint count of causing grievous bodily harm with intent, while a 5th defendant has denied an additional count of common assault. Defense lawyers today questioned if the officers allegedly carrying out the assault on activist Ken Jeong were the actual defendants, since it was dark and their faces could not be seen clearly on the TV footage. Lawrence Locke, defense counsel for Chief Inspector Wang Chou-shing, suggested that the person being carried away and allegedly beaten at the substation at Admiralty was not Jeong. Judge David Dufton then demanded the video footage be played to the court. He requested that the defense pay close attention to the person's black shirt and white shoes. Locke also told the court it would be dangerous to come to conclusions because the footage appeared blurry, adding that the view was blocked for 49 seconds, which raised the question of whether all the people in the 2 shots were the same. He also argued that by taking a look at the person's clothes, it could have been any of the arrestees that night. Locke also questioned the forensic evidence that Ken Jeong's wounds were consistent with an assault with a police baton by noting that the defendants were not carrying batons at the time. Edward Choi, defense counsel for the fourth defendant, Constable Lau Hing-pui, suggested Jeong had portrayed himself as the victim in the incidents. He questioned Jeong's credibility as a person and challenged the prosecution's description of the constable's clothing of light-colored trousers was too vague. In his closing arguments, Ching Hung, defense lawyer for Senior Inspector Lau Chuk-ngai, requested the judge take into account his client's unblemished character, adding he was there that evening to protect law and order. The defense will continue its final submissions tomorrow, while the judge said today that he expects to hand down his verdict on January 6. Rachel Lang, TVB News.
A woman has died a week after becoming sick with food poisoning following a Thanksgiving dinner at a restaurant in Tsim Sha Tsui. Health officials say 50 people fell ill after eating at the same place. Caleb Long has more.
Hours after consuming the Thanksgiving meal at a restaurant in Tsim Sha Tsui, several diners started feeling sick with symptoms including vomiting, fever, and diarrhea. The health department said the food poisoning case involves at least 50 people. 8 people were admitted to hospital, including a 42-year-old domestic helper from the Philippines. She was discharged from Queen Mary Hospital on November 28th and found dead at her employer's home on December 1st. Health officials are investigating the exact cause of death, and her case is being handed over to the coroner's court. The department said stool samples from 3 patients tested positive for Group D Salmonella. Infectious disease specialist at the University of Hong Kong, Ivan Hong, says Group D Salmonella can cause serious diseases such as typhoid fever. Symptoms include fever and intestinal bleeding. But Hong noted that the woman had received treatment during the initial stage of her illness. He said this could mean she died from an unrelated condition. But Hong stressed only an autopsy could tell for sure. Meantime, Dan Ryan Chicago Grill at Ocean Terminal in Tsim Sha Tsui today issued a statement expressing its deepest condolences and sympathy to the woman's family. In an earlier statement, the company suggested the food poisonings may have been caused by U.S. imported turkeys, which were not thoroughly cooked. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Hong Kong students remain in the top 10, according to a new international assessment for teenagers. However, local teams dropped 7 places in science, while their counterparts in Singapore scored first across the board. Winner Wong reports.
More than 500,000 students from across the globe program for International Student Assessment, or PISA, last year. Today, the results were announced. Students were assessed in 3 major areas: science, reading, and mathematics. In science, Hong Kong placed 9th overall out of the 72 regions that took part. That compares with 2nd place last year. Meanwhile, Singapore snatched 1st place, with highest scores, in fact, in all 3 assessed areas. However, local teams still managed to take 2nd place in reading and mathematics. Experts say Hong Kong has much to learn from the Lion City's education system.
In terms of science education in Hong Kong, the development of scientific inquiry skills and nature of science understanding is not very strong as compared to Singapore, I think.
In particular, they say Hong Kong lags behind Singapore when it comes to integrating technology into the classroom.
The ICT is not well integrated into the teaching and learning process. That is a very fundamental element of scientific inquiry that have to be reviewed, not by the general people, but really by the subject expert, that we have to collaborate to find a better way to really nurture that kind of high-order thinking.
The PISA test is an international assessment that takes place every 3 years. Students from dozens of regions, aged 15 and 16, are tested for their skills in mathematics, reading, collaborative problem solving, and financial literacy. Hong Kong students have long been top performers in the PISA, often placing in the top 5. Winner Wong, TVB News.
OK, Tony, what's on the sporting lineup tonight?
We have some NBA and a bit of news about bodybuilding in Hong Kong.
And that's the news. Thanks for watching.
Yep, that's the news. Goodbye.
Good night.